Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining. We're talking today about leading teams through uncertainty. I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Piers Campbell, and I'm Head of Delivery for the National Citizen Service Trust. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, NCS is a youth programme and an emerging set of youth services designed to support social mobility and social cohesion. But simply, it hangs on the idea that where you come from in life doesn't inform where you go. My role, but equally simply, is to coach and develop teams in information and digital services. And currently my focus is on software development. But over the course of the last 18 years, I've built and supported teams in various functions across various sectors. Those teams have taught me a lot, but the last few years have really strengthened my conviction about what I'd like to talk about today. So I'll start, if I may, by setting my stall out. This is what I believe. I would define change as what happens to us, and uncertainty as how we feel about what might happen to us. So change is an event, and uncertainty is a feeling. And coaches, managers, leaders, organisations spend a huge amount of time and effort and resource in managing change. But in my experience, and what I know anecdotally from my networks, very little time, effort and resource is spent on helping teams to manage uncertainty. So my assertion is this: if we repointed some of the resources our teams dedicate to managing change, to managing uncertainty, we'd unlock potential, we'd build strength and resilience, and we'd create teams that don't just cope with change, but thrive in it. Now, in change management, we plan our changes. When we focus on uncertainty, we ground our teams. In change management, we implement our changes. And when we focus on uncertainty, we navigate through multiple possibilities in search of the best outcome. And in change management, we communicate our changes. But when we focus on uncertainty, we build the necessary trust to communicate everything. So today, we're going to look at some techniques for grounding our teams, navigating through that uncertainty, and building trust. Nothing necessarily groundbreaking or incredibly sophisticated, but some actions that any leader can test and refine and see what impact that change of focus might have on their team. But before we look at these techniques, let's quickly examine how uncertainty affects us. Now, in 2016, a group of researchers at University College London investigated uncertainty by exploring how people react to being told they will either definitely or probably receive a painful electric shock. What they found seemed counterintuitive. The participants who knew they would receive a shock felt calmer and demonstrated less agitation than those who knew they only had a 50% chance of the shock. They found that when we're not sure what's going to happen to us, a part of the brain called the locus coeruleus brings the brain into a fluid state that allows it to transition across the various configurations it needs to cope with multiple possibilities. And in doing that, it releases a neurotransmitter that makes us feel anxious and on edge. We feel calmer when we know there will be a negative outcome than when we think there might be. Our brains continually create and update a set of rules to predict how the world works. So as leaders, can we create and update a set of measures to help our teams predict the best way forward? We should definitely try. So let's start looking at some techniques. Now, the first one we discussed was grounding. And by grounding, I mean enabling our teams to cope with what's unknown by remembering and orienting around the known. So our collective experience over the last couple of pandemic years have shown us that anything can change at any time. And that isn't new, but it has always been true. But we've really been confronted with it recently. My personal experience with those really very different teams over the last couple of decades has shown much the same thing on a less dramatic scale. I suppose things are always changing from one degree to another. But within that, I'd argue that there's a small subset of things that are less vulnerable to change. And when I've coached individuals through difficult changes at work previously, I've learned to ask them what is keeping them in a job or a situation that's proving to be very challenging for them. the answers tend to recur. I believe in what I'm doing, there's something I want to achieve, or very pragmatically, I've got bills to pay. Really, what we're talking about here is purpose. Not what we do, but why we do it. And as people have a reason to do what they're doing, so do teams. So the first step in grounding our team is to define purpose. Asking a team why they're here sounds simple, but it can be quite a confrontational action. And equally, my own experience shows that individuals in a team can have various opinions on the purpose of that team. And that's because purpose tends to be derived from outcomes rather than outputs. So in the example of my software development team, that team has to deliver work to meet the requirements of our organization. Those fulfilled requirements are outputs. That's not the purpose of the team. Our software development team also has to deliver work because it gives young people opportunities to have experiences that don't just positively change them, but the world around them. So that positive change is the outcome of the work, and that's the purpose of that team. So in defining that then, I'd ask each individual in the team to define what they think team purpose is, and then bring everyone together to compare and contrast. There's inevitably difference around wording and expression with this kind of thing. And sometimes when coaching this, we need to prompt to focus on outcomes. But defining and sharing purpose and anchoring to that is immensely important for any team. The second part of grounding a team builds on why we're here and adds what we believe with the definition of team values. Values, again, a very powerful anchor for a team. They tend to be emergent rather than something that we externally coach or manage into a team. Supporting your team in defining their values is pretty straightforward and very, very enlightening for a leader, a manager, or a coach. I tend to gather the team around a whiteboard, whether it's real or virtual, and ask everyone to think about good teams they've been a part of or observed in the past. As everyone adds their ideas, and patterns and themes tend to emerge, and I attempt to get down to 4 or 5 areas of agreement on the things that make a good team. Those 4 or 5 values are the team's shared belief on what a good team is. And those values can be used to manage the predictable as well as the unpredictable. They're a really useful reference point for almost every conversation you have with a team or with the individuals in that team. Now, purpose and values still change, but the rate of change tends to be slower and more controllable. A team who knows why they're here and what they believe have a massive head start in predicting their response to external events. And that head start can make a significant dent in the anxiety caused by uncertainty. Let's move on to our second technique then, which is navigation. And I'm defining navigation here as managing the transition from no knowledge to all required knowledge at a given time. Now, we briefly looked at how our teams and our brains, rather, manage uncertainty and how the release of that chemical makes us feel wired and on edge. Those aren't conditions that are conducive to effective planning or good decision making at exactly the time where we really need to be on top of both of those practices. So this is challenging for individuals, but even more challenging for teams where there's inevitable variance in perception of a situation and the best responses to its challenges. So I think there are 3 key touch points in navigating uncertainty. Firstly, share and visualize. So make sure all of those differing perspectives are captured without judgment and everybody has access to them. Secondly, show transition. So as time goes on, clarity emerges, and being able to see the previously unknown become known can provide reassurance. And thirdly, demonstrate knowledge, just showing the results of that transition and that positive progress is being made through the uncertain state. Now, my personal experience is that the simplest way to manage this process is with a pretty straightforward matrix. And here's an example. Down the side here, I've defined 3 states of knowing. Don't know, think, and know. So don't know, I have no idea about this. Assume, think, I have some idea of it, but I can't be absolutely certain. And know, I have as much certainty as I need with this. Along the top, 3 categories of importance: things I need to know, things I want to know, and things I would like to know. There are 3 categories on each axis deliberately because 3 is absolutely a magic number for us in managing uncertainty. It moves us away from that binary succeed or fail perception, but with the addition of the third option, but avoids inviting too much complexity and the instinct to double down on predictions without enough information, basically. In an uncertain environment, a team will have numerous questions and concerns. So we ask them to put them in the appropriate place in the matrix. And as a coach, this helps in 2 ways. Firstly, in prioritizing action and clarification. So I'll provide the greatest value for the team by moving the items from need to know and don't know to need to know and know. That won't always be in my power, though, in terms of quantity or speed of getting that information. So where I can't demonstrate progress in the highest priority area, I can still work and keep working to provide clarity in those other areas around want and like to know. Secondly, I can demonstrate that an unclear process is becoming clearer. So we inevitably focus on what we don't know in times of uncertainty. But with this visualization, I can provide evidence that as a team, we are forging a path through it. So let's look at a really simple example of how this matrix might be used in the event of, say, an organizational restructure. So an organizational restructure has been announced. I bring my team together and we start talking about what we don't know. And the team are talking about why this is happening, the reason for the restructure, what's my future, what's the future of the team, what's the future of the organization, what changes are we going to make to our strategy, what changes are we going to make to our project, our product, what opportunity do we have to support others, do I have the opportunity to redefine what I'm doing at the moment. Lots of don't knows, lots of intangibles flying around all over the place now. And the first thing we do is capture all of those and put them in our priority order. What do we need to know? What do we want to know? What would we like to know? Agreement from the team on that priority there. Once we have that as a coach, then I've got a good priority area of the things that I need to focus on in terms of getting clarification for that team. As I say, won't always be in my power or remit to deliver that information really, really quickly, but I know what my focus is and I've communicated what my focus is to the rest of that team. We go away and do work, more information to deliver to us, and more clarity arises. So we see, in this instance, we've got from the organisation, we've been told the reason for the restructure. We can move that down into our no column. As a result of that reason, we can make some assumptions about the future of the organisation. So we move that down in the need to know column. Similarly, we can make the assumptions about changes to strategy and the opportunities to support others. So as more information is released to us, then we have a clearer picture of what the situation is. And as things progress there, we start to move more and more things down to no. So in this example, we have still got assumptions around the future organisation and changes to the product we're delivering, but we know the reason for the restructure, we know the futures of our role and team, we know about strategy, we know about our opportunity to support others. The more things we know, however, tend to reveal the other things that we don't know. So we can see things like changes to contractual terms and the opportunities for flexible working there appearing in our don't know column. The power of that then, I suppose, is we're still able to manage those new things that are coming in with that same process. But what I can visually demonstrate to that team is that we are moving towards knowledge and clarity all of the time, and we're demonstrating what we have learned all of the time. Really, whatever the outcome of an uncertain environment, we inevitably learn as a result of the experience. So this matrix helps us frame our challenges as an opportunity to learn, and hopefully leads us to associating an undesirable situation with desirable actions, or certainly the possibility of transforming undesirable circumstances to positive outcomes. The third technique we're going to look at today is building trust. So trust is fundamental. We know a team that doesn't trust each other is pretty limited in its potential. That's inarguable and fairly uncontroversial, I'd say. At the same time, it's very difficult to create trust out of nothing, and often it takes a long time to emerge. I'd argue that we still need to be intentional about building trust in teams. As we find ourselves in uncertain situations, the absence of trust can become a huge cognitive burden on top of everything else that we have going on. Trust is an activity, not a state. So trust can't just be instituted by a leader. It needs to be built between leader and team in the first instance to create the environment for trust to thrive and flourish. And for that to happen, it can't just be as a result of actions by the leader or coach or manager. It needs complementary actions between the leader and the team. And the relationship between those actions and continuous reinforcing feedback that that relationship produces create those conditions for real trust to develop. These are the three sets of complementary actions that I think are most important in actively building trust during times of uncertainty. The first one, limiting intervention, strengthened by continuous communication. So a trustable leader believes that their team will find their way to a successful outcome. They don't believe that their opinion outweighs that of the team. They share information and personal experience to support that team's decision making. They don't allow external pressure or anxiety or neurosis to inhibit their teams. And crucially, they don't use teams as a resource to solve their own problems, but they ensure it's got that vision and purpose it's working towards. So a trustable leader doesn't ask the team for constant reassurance, but it enables autonomy by avoiding prescription and micromanagement. And that behaviour is reinforced by a team continuously communicating. So a trustable team recognises the value of that autonomy that it has, and it actively seeks to preserve it. So it ensures those with leadership responsibilities in the team, and they may be spread right across the team, those people have all the information they need to be able to manage their external commitments. So that team continuously communicates success or failure, and where there are failures or missteps, it owns its contribution to that predicament and designs and communicates its plan to correct it. So a trustable team doesn't defer responsibility or leadership, but it pragmatically recognises the part that it has to play. The second reinforcing action I've identified there is advocacy, reinforced by the aspiration to improve. So a trustable leader openly advocates for their team. They ensure that everyone affected by the work of the team is aware of the team's achievements and of the team's challenges too. They dispassionately communicate where the team is strong and where it needs to develop, and they find the opportunity to discuss the work of the team and ensure there's as wide an understanding of that work as is possible across its context. So a trustable leader makes sure that that team knows that they're in their corner, basically. And that's reinforced by the action of a trustable team that knows it's working in the open and welcomes the opportunities that that provides as an opportunity to improve. So it has the instinct to continuously improve, hardwired into its habits and practices and processes. It regularly communicates its plan to improve with its leadership and solicits support and resource where that's appropriate. A trustable team makes sure its leadership is constantly in touch with its ambition and plan to be better, and enables that to be communicated clearly across its context, organisation, and so forth. The third reinforcing action we talk about here is honesty, and that's reinforced by more honesty. So again, it seems on the face of it perhaps quite glib, but it's a simple thing that can't be stated enough, in my opinion. A trustable leader is open and transparent and honest about the reasons when they can't be fully open and transparent. So they're honest about expectations and how realistic they are, and they communicate performance, capacity, and context without blame or finger pointing, but as the result of a set of contextual and systemic conditions. A trustable leader stays aware of that cognitive burden on their team and make sure that information is shared in such a way that supports the team without making them feel like they're being misled or excluded. A trustable team is equally open and transparent, and equally open about the reasons when they can't be open and transparent. So it goes both ways from leadership and team there. It's honest about its ability and what it can achieve at a given time, and it communicates progress and challenge without blame, but again, as the outputs of a wider system and its effects. So a trustable team stays aware of priorities and external pressure on their leader, and makes sure information is shared with them without making them feel they're being misled or excluded. So as we've said, building trust is hugely challenging, but uncertain times make trust essential, and we can't wait for it to turn up on its own, I suppose. And there we are. That's it in a nutshell. Grounding teams, navigating, and building trust are the three activities I believe we should constantly be doing with our teams to manage ongoing uncertainty, so that we're prepared as well as we can be when change arrives. And to clarify my position here, I'm not really arguing against change management. I think we ask a lot of change managers and change management as a process, and it's often quite situation specific. But I really think continual work on managing uncertainty really helps us deal with the impacts of change when change arrives. Thanks very much for your time today. I hope there's been some food for thought for you here. If you have any feedback or questions, I'll drop some contact details into the comments. But otherwise, I hope you enjoy the rest of Digital Leaders Week. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.